Belgium throughout the last decade has overseen one of the most promising golden generations ever. This star-studded squad of Red Devils have each seen their fair share of club successes. But despite this, and the nation being ranked first in the world multiple times, their trophy cabinet is still empty. Which is why today I'll be going over every single international tournament campaign that Belgium has had since 2014.
Hey guys, so I know it's been eons since I first promised this video and now it's finally coming out. Things have been a little disorganized here or there, but I'm finally back in a flow. I have an editor, so now there's videos coming out every single week along with the video essay, so that's pretty nice. But enough rambling. If we can get this video to 20,000 likes, that'd be fantastic.
During the early to mid-19th century, association football became increasingly popular amongst those in the UK. This trendy new way to kick a leather ball then eventually found itself in Belgium when on October 26, 1863, an Irish student studying abroad walked into the Josephites College of Melle with a ball of his own. Thanks to the help of English teachers and students in Belgium, football's popularity quickly spread throughout multiple schools in the country, and eventually it was introduced to school curriculums to encourage a future of physical health for the Belgian youth. Football's influence then took to the cities of Belgium around the 1860s and 1870s. Notable places included Brussels, Ghent, Liège, Bruges, and Antwerp. These bustling areas were home to a large demographic of wealthy Englishmen ranging from university students, sons of doctors, lawyers, and even entrepreneurs. Members of this Belgian high society had already ventured into sports like running, rowing, and cycling. So when football became the new passion project, they pounced onto the sport like Cam Newton did that fumble in Super Bowl 50. Oh wait. While football in Belgium was initially seen as an elitist sport during its early beginnings, people quickly discovered it to be an excellent means of eliminating class differences. As a result, football quickly trumped rugby as the most popular sport in the country. Eventually in 1880, Belgium's first ever football club was founded in Antwerp by a group of English students. Initially, the team was part of a bigger athletic club which included various other sports. However, a decade later, the team became its own entity, simply named Antwerp Football Club. Finally, in 1895, in a small cafe in Brussels called Le Coq, 10 clubs for football, athletics, cricket, and cycling founded the Union Belge de Société du Sport Athlétique. And just 1 year later, the Belgian League hosted its first ever season. Eventually, later in 1912, the UBSSA reduced themselves to just governing football and renamed their federation the Union Belge de Société de Football Association. Taking it back a little bit to the start of the 20th century though, Beerschot Athletic Club President of Honor Jorge Diaz announced Belgium would be hosting a series of matches against Europe's best teams. Unfortunately, Jorge Diaz had the organizational skills that of my old high school, and the tournament consisted of just Belgium and the Netherlands.
Oh, right. There's a plan B, is there? It's just plan A was so brilliantly devised, I wouldn't have thought we'd need a plan B.
Belgium, though, went on to win all 4 games, with their best result being an 8-0 shredding of the Dutch. However, these results were deemed unofficial due to the Belgian team fielding a few English players. Belgium's first official match would happen in 1904 against France at home in Uccle, where the result ended in a 3-3 draw. 1 year later, the Belgians played the Dutch again twice and lost twice. Nevertheless, in the following year, the Belgians came back with a vengeance. On top of those emphatic results was a 5-0 destruction of the French in a place called St. Cloud. I know that's not actually how you pronounce it, but it's funnier. These results, though, and the team's colors inspired journalist Pierre Walquiers to give the national team their famous nickname, Les Diables Rouges, the Red Devils. In 1910, the Red Devils appointed Scotsman William Maqwell as their first ever national team coach. During his 3-year tenure, the Belgians won 11, drew 3, and lost 9. After beating Germany 6-2, he left and Charles Bunyan took over. He was terrible. World War I then arrived soon after, and unfortunately the national team would lose 3 players to the brutality, one of which was Alphonse VI, one of Belgium's greatest players in the pre-war period. The skillful forward scored 92 goals in 87 appearances for Cercle Bruges. He then moved to Olympique Lillois and was the first Belgian to become champion in a foreign country.
William? What a surprise!
Soon after the war, Belgium saw the return of William Maxwell just in time for the 1920 Summer Olympics in Antwerp. The hosts made it all the way to the final, where they won 2-0 after the Czechoslovakians rage-quitted in the 39th minute. 4 years later, Belgium participated in the Olympics again, only to be humiliated 8-1 by the Swedes.
Go, go, go!
The Red Devils fared a tad better in the 1928 edition, where they reached the quarterfinals though. Then in 1930, Belgium was invited to the first inaugural World Cup, where they were pretty woeful. They qualified for the next tournament, but again failed to make it past the first round. Nothing changed 4 years later, and then war took over the planet for a second time. After withdrawing from World Cup 1950 qualifiers, Belgium's national team returned in World Cup 1954 thanks to head coach Doug Livingston. The campaign started with an incredible 8-goal thriller against England, which led some Swiss journalists to name Belgium tournament favorites. Unfortunately, these journalists had as much credibility as the Onion, and Belgium was eliminated just one match later. Belgium failed to qualify for World Cup 1958, however, they were still making quite the name for themselves, with Pelé even dubbing the squad the world champions of friendlies. The Red Devils defeated reigning champions Germany in 1954, Hungary's mighty Magyars in 1956, and even Brazil in 1963. Sadly though, Belgium could never perform when it actually mattered. They failed to qualify for World Cup 1962, Euro 1964, World Cup 1966, and Euro 1968. However, fortunes changed in the late 60s with the appointment of head coach Raymond Goethals. Under his wing, Belgium became renowned for their tenacious defensive style and execution of the offside trap. In his first qualification campaign, Goethals led the Belgians to the 1970 World Cup, ending their 16-year major competition drought. Belgium's tournament even started well. The nation won its first ever World Cup match against El Salvador. However, their time was once again cut short after the Mexicans eliminated them in their last group match. Although Euro 1972 would see the Belgians go farther in a major tournament than ever before. Led by prolific forward Paul van Himst, the host of the competition won their qualification group and then defeated reigning champs Italy in a two-legged quarterfinal tie. Sadly, the Belgians' endeavors came to an end at the hands of West Germany, but nevertheless, Belgium would still claim third after defeating Hungary. In 1974 World Cup qualifiers, however, the Belgians were extremely unlucky, becoming the only team to miss out on the tournament without ever conceding a goal. Goethel's last tournament with the national team was Euro 1976, and unfortunately he had a send-off even worse than Coach Case last year. Nonetheless, the manager returned to club coaching after his national team spell and decorated his career like an over-the-top Christmas party where even the bathrooms are decked out in holiday cheer. Raymond Goethals is an unsung legend of this sport. Nicknamed Raymond the Science, many remember the manager as a tactical mastermind ahead of his time due to his advocacy for both zonal marking and the aggressive pressing we often see today. He was also voted the 13th greatest Belgian of all time in a 2005 vote conducted by Belgian public TV broadcaster Canvas, public radio broadcaster Radio 1, and newspaper De Standard. Following the departure of Goethals, Guy Thies took over the national team in 1976. Thies developed a physical and well-organized Belgian side that was always difficult to play against. This scheme of his was complemented by an up-and-coming generation of super talented Belgian players, including goalkeepers Jean-Louis Pfaff and Michel Prudhomme, right back Eric Gerrits, midfielder Jan Keulemans, and forward Francois van der Elst. This young generation didn't have a golden start though, as they missed out on World Cup 1978 in quite underwhelming fashion. However, once Euro 1980 qualifiers arrived, the world started to see the fruits of these flowers. Belgium qualified out of their group thanks to 5 goals from van der Elst. Then in the competition itself, Belgium would do just enough against footballing giants England and Italy to advance to the final, where the Red Devils would go face-to-face against West Germany. The Germans took the lead early on through Horst Hubrecht. However, the Belgians responded with a Ren van der Eycken penalty in the 75th minute. But unfortunately, Hubrecht, the hopes destroyer, would find the winner in the 88th minute. Bouncing back from that heartbreaker, Belgium then qualified for World Cup 1982, where 23-year-old striker Erwin van den Berg would give the reigning champions a crowning, if you will. After the historic feat, Belgium went on to defeat El Salvador 1-0 and draw with Hungary to earn a spot into the next round, where they earned no points. The Belgians weren't very successful in Euro 1984, but the future was becoming even more promising in the likes of 22-year-old defender Georges Groen and 21-year-old midfielder Nico Klaassen. However, Belgium had an even more promising talent. That new stellar nebula was 18-year-old Enzo Schifo. The attacking midfielder at the time became the youngest player to feature in a European Championship match. The next tournament was World Cup 1986, where most of the original golden generation were in the later stages of their prime. The campaign didn't start well for the Red Devils, as they were no match for Hugo Sanchez and co. However, in the next fixture, Belgium defeated Iraq 2-1 with the help of the artist Enzo Schifo. The Belgians then earned a draw in their last group fixture against Paraguay to advance to the knockouts as one of the best third-place teams. Next, the underdog Red Devils would play the strong and talented Soviet Union. And just like the tournament, the match didn't start well, and Chonov was not done feasting, however, as he restored the Soviet Union's lead. But what's this? It's a Hail Mary from Stefan Joe Montana de Mol, who drops an absolute dime to Captain Keulemans. And all of a sudden, having been quite inept throughout the tournament, minutes later Nico Klaassen adds another for the Belgians, and the Soviets are never able to recover. Then the quarterfinal match against Spain, Belgium took an early lead thanks to Captain Keulemans in the 35th minute. However, the Spaniards equalized late on through a drive from Juan Señor, which really sounds like the Spanish version of John Smith. The game would then go to penalties, and on Belgium's 5th attempt, Leo van der Elst fires the winner into the net. Call this man Sandra Kim at Eurovision 1986 the way he was loving life as Belgium advanced to the semi-finals. Sadly though, the yellow brick road would come to an end after Diego Maradona stole not just the show, but the whole production company. Belgium though could still be extremely proud as they finished 4th overall after losing to neighbors France in the 3rd place match. In the following year, the Belgians failed to qualify for Euro 1988. Soon after, Guy Thys stepped down and his assistant Walter Muse became the new manager in 1989. But after just 6 games and internal conflict within the dressing room, the Belgian FA were begging Thys to come back.
I am literally on my knees begging you, please.
He answered the call just in time for World Cup 1990 and helped the Red Devils reach the last 16, where a late David Platt goal sent them home. Thys then retired a year later after Belgium failed to qualify for Euro 1992. As did Belgium's silky smooth Jan Keulemans. The midfielder for the longest time had the most senior appearances as captain for the national team. With the departure of Thys, Paul van Himst took over the team in 1991. The former striker played at Anderlecht and scored 233 goals in 457 appearances, all the while winning 8 Belgian league titles in the process. His record's even better for the national team as he's tied for the most goals scored with 30. The forward also featured in the movie Escape to Victory in 1981. Needless to say, he was certainly Paul van Himst. I'm going to die alone. As manager though, he led the Belgians to the US for World Cup 1994 thanks to goals from a more mature Enzo Schifo and 24-year-old Mark Wilmots. The Red Devils went on to reach the last 16 and goalkeeper Michel Prudhomme had an iconic last World Cup winning the Lev Yashin Golden Glove after spectacular performances. But despite all the World Cup success, Belgium failed to make a 3rd straight European Championship in 1996. And after the flounder, Van Himst called it quits. Assistant coach Wilfried van Moer then stepped up, but the federation was not fond of his communication skills and replaced him with George Leekens in 1997. Leekens would succeed in taking Belgium to World Cup 1998, however at that point most of the team looked better placed in a nursery home. The manager was then sacked after the tournament, which was then followed by Enzo Schifo retiring from international football at age 32. Enzo was a phenomenal player to watch. His vision was as if he had a bird's eye view of the entire pitch, his tactical awareness allowed him to quickly dictate play, and his technical ability saw him slip past defenders with ease. In 84 caps, Schifo scored 18 goals for Belgium and created plenty more. To this day, he is considered one of Belgium's greatest ever players. Euro 2000 is regarded as one of the best editions of the tournament, but Belgium on the other hand was the complete opposite. The hosts were finally put out of their misery after Turkey shut them down like an American mall. And just like an American mall, the national team was well past its prime and starting to stare down a bleak future full of questions that needed answers. Fast. Around the same time as Euro 2000, Belgium's FA brought in Michel Sablon as technical director. He had previously worked as an assistant coach alongside Guy Thys during the World Cups in 1986 and 1990. Sablon, looking at the drastic and dreadful decline of the national team, realized there needed to be serious changes to Belgian football's prolonged state of laziness and passivity. So in his new role, Sablon immediately invested a chunk of the profit the federation earned from co-hosting Euro 2000 into youth development. As a result, a new football center was built on the outskirts of Brussels. The center provided an entry-level coaching course for free, which exponentially increased the amount of people enrolling. You know, the US could probably learn a thing or two from these guys. But Sablon's plan went farther than simply investing into youth development. He wanted to find the most optimal and efficient way to turn a young aspiring kid into a future star. Bob Broes, a youth coach who worked closely with Sablon, saw that the best domestic talents were heading to France and the Netherlands to further develop their careers. Making these observations, Broes started looking closer at what the French and Dutch were doing right. Sometimes he'd even meet with the German FA, who were also in the process of rebuilding their system.
Bratwurst mit einem Bier. Mit einer Bratwurst mit einem Bier. Ein Bratwurst mit einem Bier. Ein Bratwurst mit einem Bier.
Belgium throughout the late 90s had been using defensive and pragmatic formations based on man marking and counterattacking. And Broe's biggest observation was the usage of the 4-3-3 formation in a lot of national team setups. He noticed vast differences in the 4-3-3, which demanded more movement, intelligence, and domination. Broes and Sablon then concluded the formation to be the strongest learning environment for young players. So their plan, get rid of the standard and stationary 4-4-2 that was running throughout the country and replace it with the more mobile mobile 4-3-3. However, the proposal was met with a lot of doubt, and there wasn't any unified vision amongst the federation and its clubs. As Marcelo Bielsa once said, a man with new ideas is a madman until his ideas triumph. Sablon had his answers to these doubts though. Science. He asked the University of Louvain to carry out an extensive study on youth football in Belgium. The study saw the university film over 1,500 matches across different age groups, focusing on aspects of the game like short passes, number of touches, and build-up. Findings confirmed that the 4-3-3 was the most efficient, especially in developing dribbling and passing skills. Results also found that one of the core issues holding back Belgian youth was mentality, a mentality that put far too much emphasis on winning and not enough on development at an early age. So now with the evidence to back up his claims, Sablon's cultural revolution for the resurgence of Belgian football was finally put into action in September of 2006. Belgium's model for youth development aimed to provide footballers the proper foundations to reach for the stars, successfully develop homegrown talent in the domestic leagues, and of course, see more national team success. The youth development plan consisted of 3 phases. Phase 1 is what I like to call childish whimsical fun. This phase sees children ages 5 to 7 playing football without any real competitive drive. No matter win or loss, all that matters at this stage is that you're simply having fun. Phase 2 is where kids start learning the game. Children from ages 8 to 17 learn the basics and gradually over time get introduced to team tactics. As they grow older, they'll also be taught zone philosophy in order to improve intelligence, anticipation, concentration, and communication. This part is especially important as it's what the 4-3-3 formation requires, which players start learning around age 12. But we mustn't forget about the mental side of things either. Players are educated on basic mental skills like motivation, self-confidence, lifestyle, and discipline. Finally, there's phase 3, where we see all these skills polished up as players start to dip their toes into the world of professional football. Now, back to the current state of the national team. During the early 2000s, the Belgians went from this Red Devil to this one. The last crumbs of Belgian promise were last seen after a round of 16 exit in the 2002 World Cup. And after failing to qualify for 2 straight tournaments, the nation dropped to 71st in the world, the country's worst ever ranking. Head coach at the time, Aimé Antunes, was sacked and replaced by Ren van der Eycken, who didn't fare any better. But while the current state of the national team was very disappointing, there was something brewing up in the Far East, more specifically, the 2008 Summer Olympics in Beijing. Belgium participated in the tournament, and its young core consisting of 22-year-old defender Vincent Kompany, 20-year-old forward Kevin Morales, 21-year-old Moussa Dembele, 21-year-old Jan Vertonghen, and 20-year-old Marouane Fellaini managed an impressive 4th place finish. Some of these youngsters came through Belgium's top sport schools, institutions that existed before Sablon's plans. These schools were designed to provide the most talented boys and girls aged 14 to 18 additional training to further help them break the ceiling in their respective sports. Belgium was also starting to see the benefits of Sablon's blueprints in the emergence of 19-year-old Axel Witsel and the wonder boy that was 17-year-old winger Eden Hazard. However, despite this new great wave of Belgian promise, the national team performed poorly in 2010 qualifiers, suffering embarrassing losses to Estonia and Armenia. After those dismal results, head coach Ren van der Eycken was sacked. He was then replaced by Frankie Verkouteren, who lasted 5 games. Then Dutchman Dick Advocaat was appointed, and he lasted 5 games. In spring 2010, George Leekens, who oversaw the end of one golden generation, now had the opportunity to lead the next. During his tenure, he would see further development of the many up-and-coming young Red Devils, which now include the additions of 17-year-old striker Romelu Lukaku and 19-year-old attacking midfielder Kevin De Bruyne. 1 year later saw the introduction of 19-year-old goalkeeper Thibaut Courtois, who had recently made a move to Chelsea for $9 million. In his senior debut, he was the youngest keeper to ever play for the Belgian national team and kept an impressive clean sheet against France. The youth revolution showed far more fight in Euro 2012 qualifiers, but sadly just missed out after a loss to Germany on the final day. However, as the years came and went, Michel Sablon and the Belgian Federation were seeing their results exceed far beyond their wildest of dreams. Many of Belgium's new stars were impressing at the highest levels of club football, and eventually a lot of them made big money moves to Europe's giants. And along with all the established talent in the national team were what felt like yearly mini waves of even more prospects diving into the national pool. In 2011, during Euro 2012 qualifiers, Belgium's squad value was 140 million euros. Fast forward to when the team reached its collective peak, the squad value was over 750 million. Considering this is a country with a population of just under 12 million people makes this all the more impressive. But something that doesn't get as much spotlight though is how diverse Belgium's largest and most talented golden generation is. Belgium is a strange country. There's areas that speak Dutch, French, and even German, which makes it very difficult for the whole country to ever feel united. In fact, fact, there's always discussions about the different areas splitting up entirely. Belgium's squad has tons of multicultural roots, Romelu Lukaku's Congolese background being one example, and every player has come from differing social classes, some less wealthier than others, like Axel Witsel, who played football daily on a makeshift pitch in a low-income area on the outskirts of Liège. But despite all these differences, the national team is able to come together and use those many values as a strength against their foes. Needless to say, not just Belgium, but the entire world could learn a thing or two from this team. Because we don't need to live this nightmare of solitude just because of our differences. In fact, we could use these polarities as a way to come up with a wider variety of solutions to continue progressing as a society. And Belgium's national team is living proof of what untapped potential we as human beings harness. Alright, now the time you've all been waiting for. After an early gut punch of reality, the golden generation didn't want to repeat in search of a berth into World Cup 2014. During the beginnings of Belgium's golden generation, there was a noticeable lack of maturity that cost the Red Devils at crucial moments, which led head coach George Leekens to bail on the kids' table and join Club Brugge for more money. The federation then appointed the nation's third all-time top scorer, Mark Wilmots, in hopes that he could be the father figure the team needed. It paid off big time as the Red Devils went on to take their brooms and sweep the competition in their group, becoming the first nation to qualify for the tournament. This success also saw the Belgians skyrocket from a low 62nd in March 2011 to 5th in October 2013. Going into summer 2014, Belgium were 5th favorites to lift the trophy in Brazil. Those chances made sense on paper considering the metric tons of talent this team had. However, this would be the first tournament for every player in the squad, and because of this, inexperience would be the biggest concern, but nevertheless, that didn't matter to the close-knit group of Belgian hotshots ready to take the world by storm. Mark Wilmots had his team set up in a 4-2-3-1 formation. 22-year-old Thibaut Courtois would be the man between the sticks. The young keeper had just helped Atletico Madrid to their first La Liga title since 1996. Courtois was also yet to lose a game with Belgium in 17 fixtures. In front of him was 27-year-old Jan Vertonghen, 28-year-old Vincent Kompany, 36-year-old Daniel van Buiten, and 24-year-old Toby Alderweireld. Left-back Jan Vertonghen had just come from an up-and-down campaign for Tottenham. His defensive contributions early into the season helped Spurs keep 7 clean sheets in their first 14 games. However, on the downside were the multiple injuries that set him back. Captain Vincent Kompany had established himself as Man City's best defender and helped the club win its second Premier League title in 2 years. For the oldest player in the squad, World Cup 2014 would be the last time Daniel van Buiten would play football. At 35 years old, he called it quits after 8 seasons with Bayern Munich. On the right was Toby Alderweireld, who had limited minutes at Atletico. However, he did score an important equalizer against Malaga to help Atleti stay ahead of Barcelona in their title charge. Then you had the two-man pivot midfield of 26-year-old Moussa Dembele and 25-year-old Axel Witsel. Moussa Dembele, another Tottenham player, was establishing himself as the team's most consistent player. Axel Witsel at the time was playing at Russian club Zenit. The defensive midfielder experienced a decent season where he helped his club finish second in the league. Finally, you had the most promising and attractive piece of the puzzle, the attack. Creative midfielder Kevin De Bruyne wasn't seeing eye to eye with Chelsea manager Jose Mourinho. So in the middle of the 2013-14 season, De Bruyne was transferred to Wolfsburg and immediately he impressed, making 9 goal contributions in 16 starts. One Belgian that was thriving at Chelsea though was 23-year-old winger Eden Hazard. He had a brilliant 2013-14 campaign with Chelsea, scoring 14 times and assisting another 7. For the national team though, there was still room for improvement. He had just 6 goals in 45 caps. Another player with 6 goals for the national team was up-and-coming 21-year-old Romelu Lukaku. The striker was yet another Belgian banished by Jose Mourinho, who immediately found success elsewhere. 26-year-old winger Kevin Morales was the top scorer of the attacking bunch though, with 9 goals in 44 caps. Even better was the fact he was entering the World Cup after having his best season to date with Everton. Belgium's attacking options didn't stop there though. They had 27-year-old Dries Mertens and 24-year-old Nasser Chadli. Other notable players that added to the squad depth were goalkeeper Simon Mignolet, defender Thomas Vermaelen, and midfielders Marouane Fellaini and Stefan de Voort. Belgium also had another wave of promising Red Devils in striker Divock Origi and winger Adnan Januzaj, both just 19 years old. The Belgians were drawn to a very favorable group consisting of Algeria, Russia, and South Korea. However, in their opening match against Algeria, the 5th favorites were brought back down to earth and stunned early. And despite controlling the game, Belgium's attack looked as uninspiring as whatever the this sad excuse of an adaptation was. It also didn't help that Lukaku failed to register a single touch in the opposition's box throughout the entire game. This prompted Mark Wilmots to make some needed changes in the second half. First, Dries Mertens came on for Nasser Chadli, then Divock Origi for Lukaku. Finally, Moussa Dembele came off and was replaced by Marouane Fellaini, and almost immediately, Belgium started improving. Algeria's defense was still holding strong, but starting to show signs of fatigue. The wall finally broke in the 70th minute when Marouane Fellaini head one off the bar and in. Then just 10 minutes later, Belgium flexed their muscle on the counter and Dries Mertens bangs the winner in. Next was Russia, and because of Dries Mertens' impressive super sub performance, he earned the start for this match. And he didn't let Mark Wilmots regret that decision. Mertens throughout the first half flamed his marker constantly. The Russians had their chances too, but Alexander Kokorin may have gone a little too far on the vodka before the game. In the second half, Belgium improved their play, especially once Wilmots again replaced Lukaku with Origi. And after numerous chances, Belgium finally had their first shot on target in the 83rd minute. 5 minutes later though, and again a super sub comes to save the day, this time it's 19-year-old Divock Origi. With that result, Belgium had 6 out of a possible 6 points, however both matches were ones they just scratched by. The Red Devils then finished off their group campaign against South Korea, where Wilmots decided to rest quite a few players. The Belgians went down to 10 men before halftime, Thibaut Courtois made some big stops, and then Jan Vertonghen called game in the 77th minute with a goal that may have been offside. Oh, also Van den Boer did this. What the f is even the point of that? While the Red Devils had been criticized for their lack of bite, there was no denying their exceptional defense. The national team only conceded just once throughout the whole group stage and were now unbeaten in their last 13 competitive fixtures. Into the round of 16, Belgium would play everyone's favorite government interveners, the United States of America. Divock Origi would earn a start in this crucial fixture after his positive contributions throughout the group stages. And immediately that proved to be the right decision as Belgium absolutely dogged on the American defense. However, one man stood in their way. The Secretary of Defense himself, Tim Matthew Howard. No matter how many times Belgium outclassed Omar Gonzalez and Matt Beasler, Jesus Christ. No matter how many times Belgium's flair proved too much for the American backline, they were no match for Tim Howard.
Watch this unspoken Riz. Damn. Oh, he's commanding. Oh my god. Oh, damn.
Whoa, whoa.
The US then responded to the call of heroism themselves and threw some jabs of their own. Luckily for the Belgians, the Americans' best chance fell to Chris Wondolowski. Then in extra time, the illusion of the American dream finally dissipated and Kevin De Bruyne slots one home for the Belgians in the 93rd minute. A little bit later into the game, and Lukaku finally does something in this tournament. The Americans though got one back just 2 minutes after and gave the Belgians some late scares. But in the end, Belgium prevailed 2-1 over the Americans after registering over 39 shots. Belgium then moved on to the quarterfinals, where they'd meet a familiar foe, Argentina. In a past era, a Belgian golden generation had the whole country dreaming after him. They were absolutely no match within the domain of Diego Maradona. However, 28 years later, Belgium is back, and with a generation of superstars, future and present. All that stood between these hungry Red Devils in the semifinals now was a nation who once killed Belgian dreams before, and its new god. Faf, Koulemans, Schifo, you better be watching, because Belgium are back, and better than ever. Well, just like 1986, Belgium had their souls stripped from them by a little magician who could not be contained. The Red Devils lost 1-0 and were eliminated from World Cup 2014.
Should have started Stromae.
In just a couple years, Belgium's young core of players had evolved at insane rates. 24-year-old Thibaut Courtois was now a starter for Chelsea and helped the Blues win the Premier League in 2014-15. His 2015-16 season wasn't as great though due to a long-term injury early into the season and Chelsea in general having a serious case of hangover. Speaking of Chelsea, there was also 25-year-old Eden Hazard. The winger had an even better season after the World Cup, scoring 14 times and assisting 9. His dazzling performances earned him PFA Players Player of the Year in 2014-15. 2015-16, however, was a massive down season for Hazard. He had a 2,358-minute scoreless run to start the campaign and ended the season with just 4 goals and 3 assists. But I'll give him a pass for burying Spurs' hopes and dreams. Romelu Lukaku, another Belgian in the Premier League, experienced an underwhelming 2014-15 season. However, the 23-year-old bounced back in the following campaign and scored 18 times. Then there was 24-year-old Kevin De Bruyne, who was on a bit of a revenge tour after his girlfriend had an affair with his fellow teammate and former best friend, Thibaut Courtois.
bro.
Hey, yo, don't let him do that
I've
shit,
been
bro.
there for you since day one.
After showing glimpses of his brilliant creative ability at the World Cup, De Bruyne went one step further and created the second most chances of any player in Europe. This then prompted Man City to sign him for over 75 million in the 2015 summer window. De Bruyne picked up where he left off and impressed the citizens, scoring 14 times and assisting 13 in all competitions. De Bruyne was also the first of the young attackers to break out into the national team. Then you had the older guys for an added bit of wisdom. 30-year-old Vincent Kompany would lead the line for Belgium and was absolutely crucial for his national and club team success in the past. 27-year-old Toby Alderweireld and 29-year-old Jan Vertonghen were now a partnership at Tottenham, and thanks to their solidity in the back, Tottenham had the joint best defense in the 2015-16 Premier League season. Unfortunately, that didn't stop Spurs from bottling a two-horse race by finishing third on the final day. Talking about Spurs, 28-year-old Moussa Dembele experienced his best season in 2015-16 and was dubbed the league's most underrated midfielder by many. 28-year-old Marouane Fellaini hadn't experienced much success at Manchester United. However, his lanky build was being quite a hassle for defenders at the international level. Finally, there was 27-year-old Axel Witsel, who was only getting better at Zenit. His most notable performances came in the 2015-16 Champions League, where he averaged a 7.3 rating in 7 games. Thanks to Kevin De Bruyne and Eden Hazard's combined 10 goals, the Red Devils made quick work of Euro 2016 qualification and gained entrance to the country's first European Championship in 16 years. And not long after qualifiers, Belgium, for the first time in its long history, moved to first in FIFA rankings. The Golden Generation went into Euro 2016 with some more additions to their already strong squad, including 28-year-old Raja Nainggolan, a so-called ninja in the way he appears for a couple seconds to score a banger and then vanishes into thin air. There was also a new batch of younger talent, including 22-year-old Yannick Carrasco, 22-year-old Michy Batshuayi, and 24-year-old Thomas Meunier. So, with the national team once again 5th favorites in a tournament, it was time for the Red Devils to put on a glistening show. Centre-back Bjorn Engels would replace Kompany, but then he got injured as well. Nicolas Lomberts was next in line, but unfortunately he suffered a muscle tear, as did the next contender, Dedrick Boyata.
Well, I'm out, guys. If this is what's cool now, I think I'm done. I no longer have any connection to this world. I'm gonna go home and kill myself.
Fortunately though, Wilmots would eventually find his man to take the starting spot. 30-year-old Thomas Vermaelen. Belgium started Euro 2016 with a feisty battle against Italy. The Italians were not impressive on paper, however manager Antonio Conte had them running like a well-oiled machine as they constantly frustrated the Belgians. Then in the 33rd minute, Leo Bonucci drives a ball upfield that meets Emanuele Giaccarini, who finishes calmly. All that talent and you just conceded to a man who plays for Sunderland. Graziano Pella should have doubled the lead just 2 minutes later, but directed the shot wide. Belgium picked up the pace in the second half, however they still struggled to unlock the Italian defense. Then, right at the death, the Belgians were sunk by a Graziano Pella volley in the dying minutes. The match was a perfect example of a team versus 11 individuals. Belgium may have had the better overall talent, but their team was built on club reputation as opposed to consistent evidence of a cohesive and united national team. This wasn't anything new, but the clock was starting to tick and change was needed. Belgium looked a whole lot better in their second game against Ireland, where Thomas Meunier got the start at right back over Laurent Simon. After a goalless first half and a brutal assault on Shane Long in the box, the Red Devils bagged 3 goals, 1 from Witsel and 2 from Lukaku. But just when you thought Belgium were finally starting to fulfill their promises, they could only just edge past IKEA land thanks to Raja Nainggolan. As a result, Belgium advanced as runners-up and would play unlikely group winners Hungary in the last 16. Belgium took care of business though, as Toby Alderweireld gave the Red Devils a fiery start just 10 minutes in. Then later in the second half, the Belgians took advantage of a tired Hungarian team and scored 3 more. Belgium's win did come at a cost though, as Thomas Vermaelen would be suspended for the next round and Jan Vertonghen would be out due to an ankle injury. So in came 20-year-old Man City reserve Jason Denayer as centre-back, and Romelu Lukaku's little brother Jordan as left-back in the quarter-final bout against underdogs Wales. Quickly, the Belgians took control of the game and scored through yet another Raja thunderclap just 13 minutes in. With Wales now being forced to open up an attack, this was a perfect opportunity for the Belgians to exploit their opponents. However, they didn't do that. Instead, the team invited Wales back in, around, and eventually found out in the 30th minute. Belgium took control again in the second half, but just like the majority of the tournament, no one could put the ball in the net. They rued their missed chances when in the 55th minute, Hal Robson-Kanu's Cruyff turn sent 2 Belgian defenders back to the Stone Ages. Then, with 5 minutes left, a team of mostly Premier League players were finished off by a championship striker. And once again, Belgium's golden generation disappoints and are eliminated in the quarterfinals. After the match, a frustrated Thibaut Courtois criticized Wilmot's tactics in a press conference, which was then followed by a bit of a bust-up between Wilmot and Courtois after the manager accused the goalkeeper and his father of leaking team lineups to the press, which led Courtois to take Wilmot to court for defamation. Either way, at the end of yet another underwhelming and ineffective display, Belgian Greg Berhalter was quickly sacked after Euro 2016. Now without a manager, Belgium began their search for someone who could fully connect the country's most talented squad, unlike the windstream-ass team they had at the moment. At the time of Wilmot's sacking, there wasn't the most ideal list of available managers. However, Marcelo Lippi, who won Italy the World Cup in 2006, and former coach of the Netherlands, Louis van Gaal, were both available. Unfortunately, due to the federation's budget, they couldn't afford either. The Belgian FA also thought about bringing in a legend of the past, but none were available at the time. So, after some more searching, the selection committee had 4 options to choose from. Former Lille and Roma manager Rudi Garcia, Leipzig's director of football Ralf Rangnick, former Swansea and Everton manager Roberto Martinez, and finally Dick Advocaat again, for some reason. And in the end, the Belgian FA went with Roberto Martinez. However, not even 3 months prior, Martinez was sacked by Everton after 2 finishes in the bottom half with a team many considered to be one of Everton's most gifted. And the Federation, in search of someone who could get the best of their incredible group, picked the guy who couldn't even do it with Everton. And because of that, it was an extremely controversial decision at the time, especially with Martinez's tenure still fresh in everyone's memory. However, the Federation saw it differently, as they believed he was the unanimous choice thanks to his charisma and knowledge of football. While many were questioning the decision and others were very upset,
I don't understand anything anymore. It's difficult to understand.
The appointment of footballing legend Thierry Henry as assistant coach was able to simmer the flames at least a little bit. For the majority of World Cup 2018 qualifiers, Roberto Martinez had the team lined up in a high possession and high pressing 3-4-3 formation, a formation that he had previously used to win the FA Cup in 2013. And under his guidance, the world would finally witness the exciting Belgian attack we had been promised for so many years. Now star player 27-year-old Eden Hazard scored 6 goals and assisted 5 in World Cup 2018 qualifiers. For Chelsea, he was practically showing off. The winger had 24 goal contributions in all competitions, helping Chelsea win the Premier League. Then the following season, he made 30 goal contributions in all competitions. After 2 straight abysmal tournament performances, it looked like Romelu Lukaku's international career would be nothing but a failure. Fortunately, Roberto Martinez has revived the 25-year-old and he's been scoring goals at will. In World Cup qualifiers, Lukaku scored 11 times and right before the tournament became the all-time leading scorer for the national team. Meanwhile, in club football, called this man Adam Smasher the way he was on a weekly basis, killing everything you knew and loved. In 2016-17, Romelu was thriving and scored a season-best 25 goals for Everton. He then transferred to Manchester United for around 75 million. Lukaku didn't live up to the inhumane amount of hype, but did still score 16 and assist 7. While these Red Devils were up to no good, Kevin De Bruyne was going scorched earth on defenders. The now 26-year-old attacking midfielder registered a whopping 17 assists in the 2016-17 Premier League season. De Bruyne followed that up by helping Man City win the league in the following campaign with 8 goals and 16 assists. One player you may have forgotten about in this video already was Dries Mertens, and the 31-year-old probably wouldn't even blame you because he just fell off the earth for about 2 years. But now he was back and better than ever. In 2016-17, the winger scored 28 times for Napoli and nearly won the Golden Boot. In the following season, he then finished 5th in Serie A top scorers. Roberto Martinez would also change the defensive shape and how it influenced the build-up. In goal, you still had 26-year-old Thibaut Courtois, who won yet another title with Chelsea in 2016-17. The shot stopper that season kept 16 clean sheets and won the Golden Glove as a result. He was also starting to show his prime ability in the national team. In front of Thibaut were now 3 formidable defenders. 29-year-old Toby Alderweireld and 31-year-old Jan Vertonghen were still managing a strong Tottenham defense. Thanks to their partnership, Spurs finished with the league's best defense in 2016-17, yet another fantastic trophy for the club. Between those two was 32-year-old Vincent Kompany, living proof that balance must be maintained by the football gods. After yet another injury-riddled season where he featured just 15 times, Belgian Glassbones Greg led the best defense in the 2017-18 Premier League to a league title. If Belgium was to go far in the upcoming tournament, they'd need Vincent to stay healthy.
You've got mail.
For f***'s fuck's sake. This great wall of center backs would then be supported by wing backs on each side. That way, the back three didn't need to be mobile, as the wing backs could drop deep and turn the formation into a formidable five. This would also allow Kevin De Bruyne to create in a deeper position without any worries about having to defend. 24-year-old Yannick Carrasco, who played as a left winger in Euro 2016 under Wilmots, was now converted to a left wing back under Martinez's rule. Carrasco in 2016-17 scored 10 league goals for Atletico Madrid. Then, halfway through the 2017-18 season, Yannick went for the money and signed for Dalian Yifang in China. And before you say anything, you are lying to yourself if you think you turned down this amount of money. On the other side was 26-year-old Thomas Meunier's right wing back. After some pretty impressive performances in Euro 2016, Meunier was bought by PSG for 7 million euros, where for the next 2 seasons he consistently started as the club's right back. Martinez would then have one holding midfielder play alongside Kevin De Bruyne. That midfielder would be Axel Witsel, who after another impressive season with Zenit would take his talents to China as well. In depth, Belgium was stacked for options. Defenders Dedrick Boyata and 23-year-old Leander Den Donker, midfielders Marouane Fellaini, Moussa Dembele, and 21-year-old Yuri Tielemans, and finally you had the extra firepower from Nasser Chadli or Michy Batshuayi. The Belgians went into World Cup 2018 ranked 3rd in the world with most of the nation's talents in their peak years. But the world had heard enough about this team's potential only for there to be nothing but broken promises. It was now or never for Belgium to subject teams to their rule, and when it mattered the most. Dries Mertens kicked off the Belgians' campaign with a bang, which was then followed by 2 Lukaku goals as the Red Devils comfortably defeated Panama 3-0. The national team ran with their momentum into the next game and curb-stomped the Tunisians 5-2 thanks to goals from Michy Batshuayi, Eden Hazard twice, and Romelu Lukaku twice. Lukaku, who barely even had touches in the box 4 years prior, was now in contention for Golden Boot. All the while Eden Hazard was out there acting like an absolute menace to defenses. But more importantly, finally, after almost a decade, the Belgian national team was showing off exactly why they were to be feared by their foes. Having already sealed a spot into the next round, Belgium played their backup squad against England, who did the same. And in the match, failed wonderkid Adnan Januzaj would score his only international goal as the Belgians collected all 9 points to win the group. Next in the round of 16, Belgium would play Japan, and thankfully Vincent Kompany was back just in time.
It's missed by Vertonghen. It's a great chance for Haraguchi. He scores! Find room for the shot. Will eventually come in. 2-0 to Kashi Inui. What a strike! What a shot!
With the Belgians now completely shell-shocked more than halfway through the match, a quick recovery was needed, and Lukaku, reverting back to World Cup 2014 form, really was not helping. However, the Red Devils wouldn't let their best chance of achieving glory slip that easily. Roberto Martinez, in an attempt to save the game, subbed on Marouane Fellaini and Nasser Chadli for Yannick Carrasco and Dries Mertens. 4 minutes later, Jan Vertonghen loops a header over the keeper, and Belgium have a lifeline. Then, 74 minutes played, Eden Hazard whips a ball into the box, and Marouane Fellaini spikes it into the back of the net. And just like that, Belgium have rallied back in just 22 minutes. From there, beautiful chaos ensued throughout the remaining 15 minutes as both teams grinded for a winner. Then, into stoppage time, after some insane Honda technique, Belgium were on guard as Japan had the chance to steal the winner off a corner. Luckily, Courtois grabs the delivery and immediately sends the ball forward. The man whose girlfriend he had an affair with receives it and storms through the middle like he's prime 2010 Tebow. Ginger Shifo then dishes it wide to Thomas Meunier. He sends it towards Lukaku, who leaves it for Nasser Chadli to snatch it at the very end. The comeback was complete, and Belgium was returning to the quarterfinals of the World Cup for a second consecutive time. For the quarterfinal match, the Red Devils, for the first time in a while, would go into a game as the underdogs, and their opponents? Brazil. Before the fixture though, Martinez would make one change to the starting 11. He replaced Yannick Carrasco with Nasser Chadli. Martinez then opted for a more defensive-minded pivot, bringing in Marouane Fellaini to play alongside Axel Witsel. As a result, Kevin De Bruyne would move up to complete a vicious-looking front three with Romelu Lukaku and Eden Hazard. This was Belgium's final form. Just 13 minutes played after some end-to-end spectacles, Vincent Kompany's header deflects off Fernandinho for an own goal. 18 minutes later, Romelu Lukaku swerves through the midfield. He finds Kevin De Bruyne, who then fires a bullet into the net, and the Brazilians are left speechless as Belgium run absolutely riot. The Belgians, after their blistering 2 goals, then calmed down and fended off the pestering Brazilian attack throughout the match. Eventually, the Red Devils conceded. However, Thibaut Courtois, who was having the game of his life, refused to concede another. another. And in the end, after an inspirational and memorable masterclass, the Belgians prevail 2-1 and advance to the last four for the first time since 1986. For the semi-finals, the world would be spoiled with a match between two rivals at the top of the world. The Golden Generation versus the Talent Factory. This was a game of King of the Mountain, and only one would be left standing after 90 minutes. But hold your French fries for 1 second.
It's not French fries, but Belgian fries!
Because after collecting a yellow in the quarterfinal, Thomas Meunier was suspended for the upcoming match. As a result of having no other natural right wing backs, Martinez switched the formation. Belgium still had their standard back three, but now their midfield consisted of 5 players. That way there was more protection in front of the back line. Definitely not how Belgium wanted to enter this match, but they were determined nonetheless. Belgium dominated throughout the early stages of the game as Eden Hazard had a world-class performance. However, the French partnership of Raphael Varane and Samuel Umtiti were shutting every other Belgian down like they were Godiva stores and shopping malls. Soon after, the French started growing into the game, and now the Belgian defenders were starting to be tested. And unfortunately, they'd be the ones to break first, as Samuel Umtiti scored near post off a corner 50 minutes in. The Red Devils would never find a response despite Eden Hazard putting the team on his back, and just like 1986, Belgium were eliminated in the semi-finals. A couple days later though, Belgium defeated England 2-0 to finish third, and Eden Hazard won the silver ball due to his incredible man of the match performances throughout the knockouts. There was no doubting how incredibly Belgium performed, but at the end of the day, the Golden Generation had fallen short, yet again. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, okay? This was the beginning of the end for Belgium's Golden Generation, and it didn't help in any way that the Euros were postponed to 2021. Midfielders Moussa Dembele and Marouane Fellaini both retired from the national team after the World Cup, as did the nation's captain and most experienced defender Vincent Kompany, who retired from the national team in 2019. Speaking of defenders, most of them are quite old now, and also washed. No worries though, because Thibaut Courtois was still below 30 and even more incredibly overpowered than before. But the midfield was also starting to decay as well. Axel Witsel was 32 years old now, but it wasn't too terrible of a situation. Now 24-year-old Yuri Tielemans had just come off a fantastic season for Leicester City, helping them finish 5th for a second consecutive time. There was also 26-year-old Leander Den Donker. For wingbacks, you still had the usual. 29-year-old right back Thomas Meunier was now at Borussia Dortmund, and 27-year-old Yannick Carrasco had returned to Atletico Madrid in 2020 after the collapse of the entire Chinese Super League. Hint hint, by the way, that's the next video essay topic. However, unlike 2018, you had a couple more viable options just in case shit hit the fan again. There was 28-year-old Torgan Hazard, who was finally coming into his own. The other option was 25-year-old Timothy Castagne. While the other thirds of the pitch were declining, you still had everyone in attack. 29-year-old Kevin De Bruyne in his first season back from the World Cup had a ton of injuries. Fortunately, he didn't just bounce back, he skyrocketed even farther. The 2019-20 season saw him score 13 and tie Thierry Henry's assists in a single season record of 20.
Look at those babies.
The following season was another great one for the Catalyst, as he helped Man City win yet another title. And for the national team, De Bruyne since the World Cup had 5 goals and 11 assists. Speaking of the last World Cup, Eden Hazard carried on where he left off. The winger had a career best season, scoring 16 and assisting 15 in the league. That earned him a move to Real Madrid for a record-breaking 115 million euros. However, since the signing and a succession of injuries, all the 30-year-old has done is be underwhelming and piss off Josep Pedrerol. That all aside, he was still doing quite well for the national team, scoring 5 goals and assisting another 7 in Euro qualifiers.
Donc c'est bien pour moi.
Throughout the last few years, now 28-year-old Romelu Lukaku was seeing his national team career come alive. In his first 44 caps, he scored just 12. However, in his last 46, he scored 45. For club level, he was seeing even better success. After a move to Inter in 2019, he scored 23 times. In the following season, Lukaku then played a pivotal role in Inter breaking the Juve streak after scoring 24 and assisting 11. Despite Dries Mertens now being 34, he had still contributed to 15 plus goals each throughout the last 3 seasons with Napoli, and for the national team he registered another 5 goal contributions in qualifiers. Other alternatives included Michy Batshuayi going into his 3rd straight tournament at age 27, 26-year-old Leandro Trossard who scored twice in his first 7 caps, and finally the youngest player in the squad, 19-year-old Jeremy Doku, who had scored 2 goals in 8 caps. Belgium entered Euro 2020 number 1 in the world. However, unlike in the past when being top of the world was an achievement, now it was seen as Belgium being overrated and fraudulent, having not won a single international trophy thus far. far. First was Russia, and the Belgians took care of business, comfortably winning 3-0. Next was Denmark, who were playing solely through the indomitable spirit of humanity. However, the pessimism pro Kevin De Bruyne led an instrumental comeback in the second half to give Belgium all 3 points. Finally, the group was won after Belgium eventually found a way to unlock the formidable Finnish defense. And once again, the Belgian national team impressed going into the knockouts. The round of 16 saw the Red Devils come up against Portugal, and it'd be a Torgan Hazard howitzer that would give Belgium the lead right before the half. Into the quarters, the Belgians would have to play the hottest team in the tournament, the Spaghetti Mafia, Italy. And the fixture would be even tougher with Eden Hazard out due to injury. In his place would come Jeremy Doku. The match was extremely open right at the start, with De Bruyne and Lukaku coming up with great opportunities on the break. But it would be Italy who'd draw first blood in the 30th minute after a bad giveaway from Vertonghen. And after suffering once more through a vintage Insigne Tirigiro, Belgium's golden generation after just 43 minutes were at risk of throwing it all away once again. Nevertheless, the Belgians had been in this situation before. 1 minute after the second Italian goal, Belgium immediately win a penalty and Lukaku converts. On the hour mark now, Belgium searching for the equalizer. Doku plays in Kevin De Bruyne, who squares it to Romelu Lukaku. Enough nonsense. Belgium are searching far and wide, and this time... Okay, in all fairness, there was a deflection on that. Time is running out though. Desperation is in full measure. But fear not, because Jeremy Doku is being guided by the spirits of footballing greats from Belgium's back. A little over a year later, World Cup 2022 arrived, and Belgium were slowly inching closer to the boulevard of broken dreams. The defenders were far past their primes and only getting worse. Hell, the combined ages of Alderweireld and Vertonghen could qualify for a senior citizen discount at Denny's. Midfield was still decent though, with players on the come-up. Only problem was Roberto Martinez still trusting in Axel Witsel, who was now a shadow of his former self. Speak of the devil, Martinez's Belgium before Euro 2020 lost just 3 times in 58 games. However, in the team's last 15 fixtures, they had already lost 4. It was evident that the Red Devils were getting weaker and starting to lose the ability to dominate games like previous years. But unlike previous years, where all the concerns were directed at the ineffective and decrepit defense, now the golden generation was starting to see their attackers gradually fade in ability. Kevin De Bruyne was still ripping defenses to shreds with his hard-charging dribbling and inhumane vision. However, Romelu Lukaku and Eden Hazard were starting to lack the physicality to play in such a high-demanding system, especially Hazard, who scored just once in his last 7 caps. So rather than play to the team's strengths, Martinez now had them compensating for their weaknesses. He converted Belgium's high-pressing and possession-based team into a side who pounced predominantly on the counter. However, there were youngsters the Belgians could call upon. The likes of 22-year-old centre-back Arthur Tiet, 21-year-old centre midfielder Amadou Onana, 21-year-old attacking midfielder Charles de Ketelare, 22-year-old striker Lois Openda, and of course, 20-year-old Jeremy Doku. With the generation decomposing before our eyes, the Red Devils were only 11th favorites to win the tournament. Unfortunately, those hopes were dragged down significantly after Lukaku was deemed out for the first 2 group matches due to injury.
At times like this, we ask ourselves deep questions. Is there a God? How could he let this happen?
On top of all of this though was the tension fermenting throughout the squad before the tournament even began. As mentioned before, there's a persistent language barrier in Belgian football that creates a natural divide throughout the dressing room. In an effort to bring together the divided squad, Roberto Martinez made English the common language. And with one decision, he built a sense of equality and unity within the national team, which translated into successful displays of football built upon cohesive and collectivist values. It was going really well, and as a result, Belgium had their best finish in a World Cup ever. And then it just kind of stopped. What might be able to explain the problem was the growing resentment towards Roberto Martinez amongst the squad. First, there was the emergence of news that Martinez was open to returning to Everton. Then there was the loss of faith in Martinez after the Euros. The doubts grew significantly when the team lost 4-1 to the Dutch in the 2022 Nations League. Finally, there was the mess, which was the World Cup hotel situation. Martinez and his staff practically isolated players by cutting them off from their families and opting for a base camp 150 kilometers away from Doha.
So, obviously, you get me, no.
Because of these decisions, there was a ton of frustration from players toward the Belgian FA over the arrangements, and even more toward Martinez over how their downtime was being managed. So anyways, the tournament. As Lukaku was ruled out for the first 2 games, Michy Batshuayi would be the man up top against Canada. That didn't matter much early on though, as disaster struck for Belgium and a penalty was awarded to Canada. Thankfully, Thibaut Courtois came up with the heroics. But the slow and disorganized Belgians were constantly getting overwhelmed by the speedy Canadians. That didn't matter much though, because the Canadians' finishing was as as underwhelming as Vancouver's Poutine. And luckily for the Red Devils, they still had two things going their way: a ref who called an AFCON match before 90 minutes, and a Canadian defense that resorted back to San Pedro Sula 2014 form. The Belgians went on to win 1-0, however, it was very clear that Canada were the better team throughout. Belgium's next match was against Morocco, and in the build-up to that match, The Guardian published an interview it had done with Kevin De Bruyne right before the World Cup. In the interview, when asked about Belgium's chances in Qatar, De Bruyne said, quote, "There was no chance and that the golden generation's time had come and gone 4 years ago." He then added, "We have a good team, but it's aging. We lost some key players. We have some good new players coming, but they are not at the level other players were in 2018. Was he wrong? Absolutely not. People, including me, have been preaching this for the last 6 months. But here's the difference though, because you have to remember, he's a star player on a team he just said he had no belief in.
Let me talk! Let me talk! Let me talk! Let me talk!
Needless to say, the disconnect between him and the other players became much more visible. Oh, by the way, did I mention Belgium were playing Morocco next? Roberto Martinez decided to change the lineup quite a bit for the second group match. First was a switch from the usual 3-4-3 to a 4-2-3-1 formation. Eden Hazard would then be shifted to the center while his brother would play on the left. Then Yuri Tielemans would be taken out and replaced with young Amadou Onana. The Belgians introduced themselves a lot better this time, however they were kept at bay by a well-structured Moroccan defense. And as time passed, the Belgians were getting more nervous as their defense was constantly being challenged by the high-flying Moroccans working off the roars of their own in the stands. Eventually, the Belgians' clumsiness cost them on a set piece, however, VAR was there to bail them out. But the second half was no better for Team Guy Fieri. Morocco were playing lights out and Belgium had no replies aside from some ineffective shots outside the box. Then in the 73rd minute, Belgium's last hope Thibaut Courtois takes a nap near post. The Red Devils would never recover and eventually concede a second right at the death. After the world witnessed the uninspiring and practically useless attack, Jan Vertonghen made reference to De Bruyne's interview, suggesting the performance was perhaps because Belgium, quote, were too old to attack. There was also criticism from the dressing room regarding Roberto Martinez's inclusion of Eden Hazard in the starting lineup against Morocco, despite the attacker providing little to no impact in the last 2 years. And what better way to follow this up than to have a family barbecue the very next day? However, despite the metric tons of high school drama occurring, half of which he created, Roberto Martinez wasn't ready to give up. The head coach believed after the loss to Morocco, Belgium now could wake up and officially start their World Cup. Jesus Christ. Their last group match opponents would be tough though. Croatia. However, if the Red Devils could free themselves of all their burdens and rediscover their enjoyment for the game, there would be a chance for them to turn back time and potentially redeem themselves. Before the match, Martinez finally decided to bench Hazard, but not for the reason we'd all like it to be. Nonetheless, the Belgians were playing a lot better than in their first 2 games, but once again couldn't find the back of the net. Even worse now, Morocco was beating Canada, meaning Belgium needed a win to advance to the next round. But fear not, Belgians, your all-time top scorer Romelu Lukaku is back.
Again De Bruyne, again Lukaku. De Bruyne picks a lovely ball out here, and Carrasco can't finish it. Lukaku can. It's De Bruyne again. Oh, good defending. Meunier back in. Still Doku on and on he goes. Talking Hazard back across the major goal. Lukaku.
And so, with a goalless draw, Belgium's catastrophically bad and hilarious drama-filled campaign crashes and burns. Having embarrassed himself and the country, Roberto Martinez quickly resigned after the World Cup. Some players expressed sadness, while others wished the manager had gone long before. They blamed Martinez for failing to rebuild and re-energize the team with its young talent when it was very clear that the golden generation were fading in influence. But a far bigger problem that could explain not just the failures in 2022, but the failures throughout the era of the golden generation, was the lack of leadership within the squad. As we've already mentioned about 17 million times now, Belgium's dressing room was really tricky to work with. There was never a collective dynamic. Some teammates' relationships would be warm, while others would be frozen cold. But despite this, Vincent Kompany's leadership had the ability to strengthen these bonds and diffuse the tensions. If we exclude 2014, Vincent Kompany only ever featured in one tournament for the Belgians. In the other competitions, he was missing due to either injury or retirement later down the road. In every competition he didn't play in, when Belgium had their backs against the wall, they'd become disorganized and dysfunctional. dysfunctional, because there was never anyone there to lead them out of even the smallest of caves. However, in the one single tournament Vincent did play, Belgium produced exceptional results as a properly led team against some of the world's best to acquire their greatest ever finish in a World Cup. Which now makes you think, could things have been different had Vincent Kompany's entire body not been made out of literal Ritz crackers? After Roberto Martinez's departure, the Belgian FA went searching for a new head coach by launching a job offer on LinkedIn, where anyone could apply for the job. Probably 99% of the applications were trolls, so in the end, the job goes to former Leipzig coach Domenico Tedesco. All the while, Roberto Martinez somehow fails up again. I love this game. However, Belgium after the World Cup would also lose arguably their greatest ever player, Eden Hazard. The 31-year-old announced his retirement from the national team after the tournament, finishing his international career with 33 goals and 28 assists. Many others from this tarnished golden generation will follow suit in the years to come, which will force the national team to rebuild. And maybe that's exactly what they need. The next generation of Belgian promise is nowhere near the quality of the group of monsters we've witnessed for the past decade, but with clear knowledge of their limitations, maybe these humble players will work on transforming each other in order to produce results instead of each individual player trying to do everything themselves. That's at least a hopeful perspective, because we could absolutely see the exact opposite. To conclude though, Belgium was given one of the greatest groups of talent this sport has seen in a while. An incredible blessing, but maybe also a curse in disguise. Because despite the core of this group experiencing historic successes and putting the nation back on the map, these individual successes are what led to the golden generation's downfall. And now, a decade later, with almost everyone past their prime, all the world will ever remember about this once promising bunch is what could have been for this now failed generation. Man, oh man, am I excited that I am finally done recording this. 40 pages, baby. If you've reached this point though, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video essay. Again, I'm sorry that these come out very rarely. It's only because I put so much care into them and want them to be good, and also, for some reason, they keep getting longer. But of course, a massive shout out to all our patrons that allowed this to be possible, including Janusz Balasz, Krista Maceno, Milioe009, Weston Ware, Aldipu, Alex Rod, Olta, Amin Suamez, Aray-san, Carlos Anaya, Daniel Ortiz, Francisco Hernandez, Miguel Munoz, Return Fire, Rory Burns, Sog, The Motor Drive, Tomicus, Trevor Batson, Vanilla Mexican 17, Victor, David Dunn, Dominic Griffin, Emmett Shea, Lewis, Joe Aparicio, MX Weeb, Patrick Burley, and Unbroken Persona. If you'd like to join the Patreon, there'll be a link down below and up in the annotations. You can follow my Twitter if you want, follow my Instagram if you like, follow my TikTok, trying to get to 20,000 there, and of course, you can follow my semi-active Twitch. But until then, I'll see you guys.